morning, everybody. My name's Jamie Weller, and welcome to Bravo 22 live YouTube channel, brought to us today by, supported by the Royal British Legion and the Drive Project. Now, today we've got a great actor with us. Before we turn to him, I just want to tell you about myself. I've been with Bravo 22 now since 2019, and I've been involved in a number of projects. But yeah, I think the one that really sticks in my mind was the theatre production in Birmingham Hippodrome, which was the Reparation Island piece, and it was amazing to be on stage in front of such a fantastic theatre. I've never been involved in the arts and theatre, so for me it was a great experience to begin my journey with Bravo 22. It's given me a great deal of confidence, and it's opened up a lot of avenues and doors that I never thought existed. So it's been a real pleasure. So, you know, you should share this YouTube channel amongst your social media, friends and family. Now, turning to today's is our actor who is able on both the stage, theatre, radio and film, the wonderful, adaptable Robert Glenister. Now, Robert has had we're going to explore his career. He's had a fantastic career. And Robert, when did you begin your acting career?
Well, I was in the National Youth Theatre when I was about 15, and through to when I was 18. And a lot of us, when we're sort of purloined as extras in the film Quadrophenia, which was about 1978, 79. And so I did that, and then in the summer holidays, and then from the youth theatre, cut a long story short, I got sort of headhunted by what was then Thames Television to do a play called Little Girls Don't on the telly. And I got an equity dispensation that allowed me to do it because the equity was a closed shop at the time. I was doing my A-levels at the same time, but I sort of managed to juxtapose the two. And I then got an agent from that and was going to go and do a degree, but I thought, well, you know, you started, so, you know, I'll finish in mastermind parlance. But so that was how it sort of started. And then I sort of worked my way through and carried on doing television work, and then started to work in the theatre. So it was a sort of slow process, but I did sort of start when I was in my late teens and bypass the drama school sort of university bit.
Oh, okay. So in terms of drama school, then you didn't go to drama school. Do you think that's hindered you at all?
I don't think it's hindered me. I think it's slowed me up. And I think it would have been an experience that I would have liked to have had, not just as a drama student, but as a student generally. I mean, just sort of taking part in all that sort of rites of passage. And I think consequently, I was probably a bit slower growing up, a bit less mature than some of my contemporaries. Yes. And professionally, it didn't really hit me until I started to work a lot in the theatre, and I sort of had a baptism of fire at the National Theatre when I was doing a fantastic play by Brian Friel called Translations. And I was playing a part that I wanted to play it desperately, but then I realised, having got it, that I needed to do a lot of work because I hadn't had that grounding in drama school that gave me the technical equipment to play it, because it was a difficult role. So I think from that point of view, I sort of regret it. But you know, one overcomes these things, and overcame that and carried on and had ups and downs, as we all do. But so yeah, but that from that point of view, I sort of, in hindsight, I probably would have liked the student experience. Yeah.
So your family, your dad's a director.
Yeah.
Your brother Philip is also an actor. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, is it something in terms of you've always wanted to do from an early age, that you've always wanted to go into this and follow in the footsteps of your father and such?
Yeah, it was. I mean, my passion was the theatre. It wasn't really television, although I did, you know, when I was, when I was younger, and me and my bro, we were taken to the BBC on a Saturday afternoon and would walk around the studios with Dad, and we'd go into the studios where they were doing Colditz or Dixon of Dock Green, or various other things. And it was Secret Army, I remember going. And it was an sort of exciting, it was like a playground really, because you just go into these different areas. And when I started to work in television, I did a sitcom. One of my first tellies was a sitcom in the early 80s called Sink or Swim. And we recorded it at Television Centre in front of a live audience on a Saturday, either a Saturday or a Sunday night. And so you'd go around the studios there. So you'd have multicoloured swap shop next door. Then the other side, you've had grandstand. And then I remember one Saturday night sitting in the foyer, they were recording the Parkinson show that night. We finished before them. I was waiting down in the foyer at Television Centre. I can't remember why now. And the lift doors opened and Muhammad Ali walked out because he was a guest on Parkinson that night.
Amazing.
And the whole place just sort of froze in awe at this sort of charismatic wonder that walked out of the lift, which he was. So it was an exciting place to be.
Yeah. And what age were you when you what age were you when you were in Television Centre?
21. I suppose I was working.
Yeah. I remember Swap Shop. I mean,
I mean, it was big.
That was must have back in the 70s, wasn't it, or something?
It was late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no 11. Right.
Yeah, no 11. Yeah.
So your passion's theatre, but before I move on to theatre, what I'd like to ask, Robert, is you was involved. You was a drummer, weren't you, in a piece? One of your first pieces on television was you a drummer? And what was the name of the theatre? The name of the program? Was it something to do with the Beatles?
Oh, The Birth of the Beatles. That was a film. Made by a well-known, I'm not sure he's with us anymore, by a sort of well-known American entrepreneur chat show host called Dick Clark. And it was about the early days of the Beatles. And I think initially I went up to play George Harrison. And I lost out on that. But I had mentioned during that audition that I could play the drums. So they cast me eventually as the drummer Johnny Cass, who had a band in Liverpool called Johnny Cass and the Casanovas. And I had one line. And it was when the Beatles were auditioning for Larry Parnes, and they hadn't got a drummer because Ringo wasn't around then and Pete Best wasn't around then. And I had one line and I had to say, I'll sub if you like. And so I played, I can't remember what I played now, Hippie Hippie Shout, or something. I can't remember, Hippie Hippie Shake or something like that. I can't remember. Yeah.
Now, we've got, from our viewers, they can ask us questions through the live chat, and I've got a couple of questions coming through. So I'm just going to turn to our viewers and ask some questions from them. So we've got a question from Shirley, great question. And she's asking, what's been the most challenging role and why? Great question, Shirley.
The most challenging role and why? I think probably some of the classical roles that I've done. I never set out necessarily to be a classical actor, but I've always loved Shakespeare. I've always admired the great classical actors like, going back to Olivier and Gielgud and now through Ian McKellen, Alan Howard, into my contemporaries, Simon Russell Beale and Mark Rylance and people. And so I suppose when I played Hamlet at the Sheffield Crucible in the early mid-90s, and because I hadn't done that much Shakespeare, that really was a baptism of fire. And I got a lot of help from Michael Rubman, who directed it, who I worked with at the National before, who was then running the Crucible. But the one abiding memory I have of it, apart from the surprise that, because we all think everybody knows the story of Hamlet, that everybody knows that there's a sort of carnage at the end where everybody dies.
Yeah.
And we had quite a military Prussian sort of production. So we were in uniform, and consequently we were drilled by this sergeant major from the local army recruiting centre. And he was a lovely guy, Geordie guy. And he came in and he drilled us, but he didn't know Hamlet. He hadn't seen it before. He didn't know the story from beginning to end. And he came to see it on the first night. And after we finished, he came back and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "You didn't tell me they all died." And it was sort of a revelation to me, because you go, well, of course, we all know what the story is, but why should we expect everybody else to? It's sort of slight arrogance that everybody should know what all these plays are about. But anyway, in answer to the question, I think those sort of roles. Then I went to the RSC and did The Tempest in Caliban in The Tempest and Duke in Measure for Measure. And those were the biggest challenges, certainly in the theatre, because they're long role. You know, you walk on the stage at, well, certainly in Measure and Hamlet, you walk on the stage at 7:30, you walk off at 10:30. So in terms of stamina, if nothing else, it's quite a challenge.
We've got another question coming in the view. That's a great answer. Thank you, Robert. So Ian's got a great question. He's asking, how do you choose the roles that you're happy to play?
Oh, good question. Well, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they choose you. Really. I mean, I don't really chase after. I mean, I don't sort of go after playing certain parts. I tend to quite like waiting to see what comes up, if anything. So I think if it's something that is a challenge that I would not anticipate necessarily being asked to do, that's always a bit of a carrot. I think it's also on a sort of slightly superficial level where it's being done, who's doing it, who else is going to be in it. All those sort of things contribute. You don't always know that, certainly in film and television, but in the theatre you tend to. So it's and often the choice becomes a necessity because we're all out of work sometimes. That's the way this profession works. So if you haven't worked for a while and there is an offer to do a play in the theatre for not a great deal of money, and you get offered a telly or something on screen wise for a little bit more money or a lot more money or whatever, then sometimes it's needs must. And you go, well, actually, I've been out of work. I can't afford to work in a theatre at the moment. So I'll go down the telly road. So sometimes it's as simple a decision as that. But creatively, it's something that offers a challenge and something that maybe I haven't done before, or or playing a sort of part that I don't necessarily think I'd normally be cast in.
Brilliant. And that's a brilliant answer. Thank you for that. But earlier you said that you prefer theatre as opposed to television and film, but you've also been in radio, haven't you? I mean, I have. But why do you prefer theatre over television and radio?
I don't prefer it. I mean, it was my passion. It's why I became an actor initially. It wasn't, and ironically, because my dad worked in television, so he didn't bring his work home with him every night, but I was always surrounded by, the television world, if you like. But it was still acting, still the theatre that really was the draw for me. And I think to a degree, theatre is more collaborative. I think it's you have perhaps a greater input in the theatre than you would in television or film by definition, because television film is incredibly expensive. It works very fast. And you have people who've done a lot of preparation, directors, producers, designers.
Could it be, because I mean, obviously I've been involved in theatre and it's live. And for me, that's what I like about theatre, has been in front of the stage with the adrenaline rush in and being in front of a live audience. Is that something that drives your passion?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a live audience is always gives it the extra sort of adrenaline boost. And certainly in the early stages of performance, when you're sort of previewing before having a press night, and the anticipation of, and just sitting in your dressing room and hearing an audience come into an auditorium, settling down, you can sense that sort of anticipation of them, people thinking, okay, I'm up for this. I want to see this. I hope I enjoy it. And you want to give it your best, What were your feelings when you walked onto that stage for the first? Because the Hippodrome's like a barn, isn't it? It's huge.
Yeah, well, we weren't actually on the main stage. We was on the one of the sides. But I mean, I think for me, because I'm visually impaired, I was more concerned about bumping into a light or into a microphone or falling off the edge of the stage or something. But I mean, I just got a real buzz out of performing. It's something I never experienced. But I mean, in terms of your theatre world, what's been the biggest highlight?
I think working at the National Theatre on and off, I suppose, now for 25 odd years. I haven't worked there recently, but that's always a thrill to go into that building. And because there are 3 theatres in that same environment. There's a huge buzz every night because most of the time it's sold out. The foyers are always busy. There's always a lot of people there, and it's so I think then in 3 years at the RSC was exciting. Working in the West End is always exciting, especially if you're in a bit of a hit. I did Glengarry Glen Ross a few years ago with Christian Slater at the Playhouse in the West End with a great cast, and that was exciting. Great play, and the best thing was we started at 7:45 and we finished by 9:15, so that was a result. But yeah, I mean, I think everything is occasionally, you make a decision and it's not quite as enjoyable or as challenging as you anticipated, but that it comes with a job.
Okay, I'm going to turn to our viewers now and ask them see what questions they've got in the so what one's coming in now. So Kate's got a brilliant question. She's asking, what theatre director have you worked with and enjoyed working with the most?
Oh, I've enjoyed working with a lot of directors in the theatre. I mean, often for different reasons. I mean, I enjoyed hugely doing Ibsen with Adrian Noble, who's one of the great Ibsen directors. I love working with Nick Heitner at the National and at the Bridge recently. Young directors, Lindsay Turner and Sam Yates. Every director offers different things. Lindsay Posner, I'm going to leave somebody out now. I know I'm going to leave somebody out.
Always,
But I mean, across the board, I mean, I've been really lucky. I think I've been really lucky. I worked with a great director at the Manchester Royal Exchange called Greg Hertzhoff, who taught me a huge amount. Michael Rodman, who I've mentioned. It's just I haven't really had I know some people have bad experiences, but I've been very lucky. And I'm not just being sort of diplomatic. I really haven't had a bad experience working with anybody. I mean, it's always been very fruitful and very productive. And certainly in the theatre, because I said earlier, because I think it is collaborative. And I think that the best directors allow you in. They don't tell you what to do. They don't dictate. It becomes a process whereby you're sort of discovering things together. I've just been working with Jamie Lloyd in Jamie Lloyd's company, who's fantastic. We were doing The Seagull before the pandemic struck at the Playhouse, and we did 4 previews, and then we got taken off. But that was a great rehearsal process, and then we had something. Well, I mean, it's not for me to say, but I think we all thought we had something a bit special, and that we were very excited about, and hopefully. Later this year, we'll be able to resurrect it. I mean, the set's still up and all the rest of it. But I mean, the theatre's been devastated by this pandemic. I mean, it's just
it's been awful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and not just because of the obvious reasons. It's when we're going to come back again, because it's all very well saying, well, okay, we can go back then and let's do it. But you also have to have the confidence that an audience is going to be confident enough to come back, because to remount a production is expensive, and you don't want to spend all that money and then discover you've got nobody coming to see it. I mean, I think hopefully that won't be the case, but you just can't tell.
Great answer. Thank you, Robert. Now, there's another question coming in from a viewer. Yeah, Davey's got a great question going back to Shakespeare, theatre again. Is there any roles in Shakespeare that you haven't played and would love to?
I'd like to play Macbeth, which I never had a chance to before. I think I might have been asked to. I think I didn't have the confidence a few years ago now. But I would like to have a crack at that. I'm not sure about. I'm not old enough. Well, no, I probably am old enough for King Lear, actually. But I think you've got to earn the right to play something like King Lear. In the same way that as a younger actor, you probably got to earn the right to play Hamlet as well, which I'm not sure I had at the time. But I think certainly Macbeth I'd like to play. But I haven't really given it much thought. Somebody did say to me, how would you feel if somebody asked you to play King Lear? And I think I gave the same answer. I just said, I think you've got to earn it. And I don't think I have. Because I think there are people who've dedicated themselves to the sort of the Shakespeare canon and dedicated themselves to classical theatre. And I can't claim to have done that, in all honesty. So, but yeah, one. Yeah,
that's a great question. So, what's been your most embarrassing moment in terms of when you've been on theatre or performing live on radio or on theatre?
Well, I think if you're doing a long run, it can actually get quite it can actually get quite sort of not boring, but you get into a routine. You get into a routine, and you start being a little bit careless. You don't concentrate as much as you maybe should be doing. I was doing a production of The Duchess and Malphie about 20 odd years ago, probably more, with Juliet Stevenson and Simon Russell Beale. We'd done a time at Greenwich. We'd done a tour of the provinces, and then we came into the West End to Wyndham's Theatre. And there was a scene, I was playing Bossler, Simon Russell Beale was playing Ferdinand. There was a scene where I had to come in, and Simon had to say to me, Bossler, how fares the Duchess? To which I had to reply, uncertainly, sir. One particular matinee, I wasn't concentrating. Simon walked in and said, Bossler, how fares the Duchess? To which I replied, unthinking, certainly, sir. And neither of us realised for about 5 or 10 seconds what I'd said. And then we both clocked it. And then it became very difficult to get to the end of the scene because we were both convulsed, shall we say. But I mean, there's always a danger. I mean, corpsing and all those things, there's always a danger of that. But that's one that sticks out, because that became sort of, I'm a terrible corpser. Once I go, that's it. I'm off. Forget it. So that was one of them. That was the major one I remember. Yeah. Yeah.
That's. But you managed to keep it together and carry on through.
I think, yeah. But I think, yeah, just. And I think there was one moment in that production as well where, because everybody dies at the end, and I think I got my dagger caught up in, and I stabbed Simon. I didn't draw blood, but I did actually stab him once inadvertently. And when I was playing Hamlet, I stabbed myself. When I was supposed to stab Polonius, I had this rather long dagger, and I drew back to stab Polonius through the arras, which is like a big curtain, and I stuck the dagger into the back of my knee. So that stopped play for a little bit, but you carry on. Wow. There's this thing, Dr. Theatre. So if things go wrong, you just get on with it. So
yeah. And let's turn now back to our viewers, because they've got some great questions coming through. Let's just see. Oh, that's a great question, Phil. He says, Robert, do you get nerves, or do you still get nerves before performing? Great question.
Oh yeah. I mean, it gets worse. It doesn't get any better. I mean, when you're younger, you're sort of footloose and fancy free to a degree. I think the older you get, the more you start thinking about it, the more you start, you get up in the morning and you think, am I going to get found out today? Is this the day that people are going to go, he's not that good? So there's always that feeling of trepidation. I had a sort of, I'll completely come. I mean, it came out in the press, so it's not a secret. But when I was doing Glengarry Glen Ross, and I had a panic attack on the stage, and I sort of blacked out. And that was ultimately through fear, I think. And there's famous instances where, I mean, the late great Ian Holm, who was one of my favourite actors of all time, and who I was very privileged to work with some years ago on the telly. He had an experience when he was doing Iceman Cometh at the Aldwych. He was with the RSC, and come the interval, he locked himself in his dressing room and he wouldn't come out. And because stage fright had hit him to such a degree, and I don't think he worked in the theatre again for about 20 odd years. So it can happen to anybody. I mean, from somebody as great and as talented as him. But yeah, it doesn't get any easier. No.
Yeah. No, I just there's another question coming in from our viewers. Yeah, so John's got a great question. How important is an agent? Great question from John.
It is a good question, and it's very, very important. I mean, it's more important now than I think it's ever been. I was very lucky when I started, because I got an agent, because I got this television role early on. I got an agent, a good agent, very, very quickly. But it's not just important to get an agent. It's important to get an agent who is got some profile and has contacts, and who casting directors come to for ideas and inspiration. And I think it's very difficult now, because there are a lot of, certainly now, I mean, I think it's devastating for young actors and actors leaving drama school. at this stage, because the business is in such a turmoil at the moment because of this pandemic. And so agents per se are reluctant to take anybody on because they don't want to take people on that they don't think they can get work for. And given the fact that a lot of people starting in the profession do start in the theatre, it's horrendous what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I would say if you do go to drama school and you haven't got an agent by the time you leave, I think it's very, very difficult, because the only way you can get an agent is by having some kind of showcase, which drama school gives you, certainly in the last year. Once you leave drama school, you haven't got that showcase, so you've got nothing to show. So it is very important, and it's very difficult. And I'm convinced that there must be a great many really talented actors who, for one reason or t'other, didn't manage to get an agent, who should have done, and have struggled accordingly.
So that's a great answer. Thank you for that, Robert. Now, I mean, really, my final question was, what advice would you give our members of Bravo 22 advice, other than an agent? What other piece of advice would you give us?
I think if you want to come into this profession as an actor, or I mean, in any capacity really, but certainly as an actor, you have to be absolutely certain that there is nothing else in the world that you want to do, that you are prepared to take the rejection, to take the unemployment, to go and take other jobs in order to actually earn your keep in between acting jobs. And it's tough. I mean, it really is, that level of rejection, because it's happened to me. It's happened to probably most people, certainly in the early stages of their careers, where it's rejection after rejection after rejection. So I think my advice would, as I say, would be to just be absolutely sure that if you did not act, it would affect your life to such a degree that it wouldn't be worth living. I know that's being terribly melodramatic, but I think you've got to have that level of passion and that level of commitment in order to survive, because it's a tough game now, and it's much tougher now than when I started 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was, when I started, there were 3 television channels. Now there are 400. When I started, there was a repertory system that you could go into the provinces and make mistakes and play parts that either you weren't very good in, or you could play parts that you were fantastic in. You can't do that anymore. It's an instant. You walk into a room, somebody says, "Yes, I'll have that person," no, or no, and it's tough. Yeah. So be passionate and committed. Yeah.
Tough. That's a great response. Great question. Great answer and advice, Robert. And thank you for that. Now, I mean, I've really enjoyed interviewing today, and on behalf of myself personally, and on behalf of Bravo 22 and the Drive Project and the British Legion, we'd like to thank you for giving us your time today and telling us about your fascinating career in theatre, radio and film. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And going out to our viewers, if they want to get involved in Bravo 22, then email bravo22 at thedriveproject.co.uk and get involved. You never end up. You could have a fantastic career like Robert has. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. It's been a real pleasure.
Very much.
You have a great day. Thank you.
And you. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to viewers for watching today and taking the time, and share this channel on your social media channels. The more we can spread it, the better it will be.